Good morning. I would like to make a little video of an article I have made on the website called madinamerica.com. It is about how our thoughts can be helpful. It's an article about helpful and hopeful thoughts. And the basic idea is that good psychotherapy research shows that if we change our way of thinking, we can change our way of feeling. We can take away a lot of psychological problems. So the first good thought that has helped me a lot through the years is that there are no psychiatric illnesses, really. What we call mental illness, what I like to call psychological problems, or even better, psychological challenges, is these are extreme varieties of normal behavior. And extreme not necessarily in a negative sense, but extreme in also can be extremely positive. So that, for instance, a person who washes their hands a lot, it's actually good hygienic behavior, but it can go a bit over the top and become OCD. But basically it's a person who wants to be conscientious, who is conscientious, who wants to not infect other people, etc. And then it can go a bit over the top. And of course then there are therapies that can make it go down in the normal range again. A person who is depressed is a person who thinks more about negative things than most people. A person who's anxious is a person who thinks more about what could go wrong. So all of these things, because they are just part of the normal way of reacting, it's just that it's a bit extreme. That means that with therapy we can take them down in the normal range. And it's actually quite normal to be anxious approximately 50 minutes per day. And it's quite normal to have bad days. One very simple treatment approach that has helped me and all of my patients is from Martin Seligman's research on positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. And it's very easy. Write down 3 good things every day. 3 good things that have happened every day. And you can elaborate. You can write, for instance, my grandchild came and played with me today. I'm so happy that I have a grandchild and that we can have such a good relationship, and I must have been a good father and a good grandfather because both my son and my grandchild are so okay. So a positive event, and then put an interpretation on it that can be very beneficial. So this was depression, but even more serious things, what is called so-called serious mental illness, like mania and psychosis, may actually, or I think it is actually, just an extreme variety of normal behavior. It is something that we can all have sometimes. We can all have very strongly valued ideas that we can't really justify, and we can really go for them in a way that other people would think is totally unrealistic. The theory is that 100,000 years ago there was a mutation in the human genome that created people who were extra creative, who had a lot of ideas and had a lot of energy behind their ideas, and that this worked great. It probably was what made us develop as a species, made us into human society, so to speak. And this was not a problem at all until we started to eat less fish. Omega-3 fish oil seems to be essential for keeping this process just creative, and that it doesn't go a bit over the top and becomes what many would call psychotic ideas. Research has shown that if you give omega-3 to people who are at risk for so-called schizophrenia or psychosis, a lot less will develop problems. They might be creative and a bit odd, but it doesn't reach the level where they need care, where they cannot really take care of themselves. So in a group that had high risk for psychosis, so-called psychosis, 28% developed it if they didn't take the fish oil, and those who had taken fish oil only for 3 months, 1 year earlier, only 7%, only 4% developed psychosis. So this is a fantastic result, and it supports the idea that, okay, it is creativity, ingenuity, fantasy, etc., but it needs fish oil to keep it within a good range, we might say. A second very good thought that I've had for a while, and that has helped me personally in many ways, is about life and death. I used to read everything I could get my hands on near-death experience, because I said to myself, it is very important that we know what happens after death. Why shouldn't we know? Why should we leave that to chance? It's the only thing that we're sure is going to happen to all of us. We're all going to die. So, and we all have family members who will die. So knowing what happens before, knowing what happens after death is very important. And I said, okay, you have to ask those who have been to the country to tell what the country is like. You can't ask somebody who says, no, this country doesn't exist, and no, we can't know anything about it. Anyway, the atheists. Atheism is also a belief. So don't ask people who haven't been there, ask those who have been there. Okay, and when you ask people who have been clinically dead, and some of them have been dead for quite long periods, like an hour. If you're cooled down through drowning in very cold water, you can wake up without brain damage even after 1 hour. And these people have profound experiences, and they all say, it's great. It is so great, you get to meet your family, and like Raymond Moody said, a researcher, Dr. Raymond Moody, heaven is, or the afterlife, is filled with love and knowledge. And I like that. Love is very good, but without knowledge, I would think it would be a bit boring. So that's near-death experience, and the conclusion of the near-death experience is that there is a life after this life. There is a life after we have died, and that it's a very good one. It's very good and harmonious, and we get to meet the people we love, and we also get to keep an eye on the people we love here on earth while we are there. Okay, that's a comfort for a lot of people who are afraid of dying away from their children. Second part of this thought about life after death came when I read a book about a cognitive therapist, atheist, Michael Newton. He used to do a hypnosis for pain control as part of the cognitive therapy, and then he asked, go back to the time when this pain started. And in many cases, they went back to a previous death experience in a previous life. One case that is easy to remember is a woman who was standing on a cliff in the previous life and was prodded in the back by a spear until it hurt so much that she jumped to her death. And she got the classical near-death experience, seeing her body from above, going into the light, etc. Newton, since he was an atheist, he says, yeah, this is just popular culture. They've read about it, they've seen films about it, of course they will give you some kind of fantasy like that. But he was also very curious, so he wanted to know what happens. In a way, how does the fantasy go on? Because there's not that much about like 3 or 4 or 5 days after death, because this is not in the near-death experience. So he started asking them, and he was very astonished that he found that people had very similar experiences. And he summed it up as follows. 1, there is life after death. 2, it's very good, we get to meet the family members. 3, when we come to Earth, it's for a reason. It's because we want to develop. So people who have had just a few lives, who are beginners, they get usually very easy lives, good economy, good relationships, no abuse, easy life. Whereas those who are old souls, who might have hundreds of lives behind them, they choose the really, really difficult lives. Psychological problems of all kinds, abuse, poverty, sickness, you name it, all the problems we can have. So this is the reason why good people have so many problems, according to Newton. And it all makes sense if this is the case. And I don't say this is the absolute truth, but Newton hypnotized 7,000 people before he dared to publish about this. So he has a pretty good database. And if it is so that we actually get to choose, he says that we get to choose between several scenarios, and we pick the scenario that best fits with what we want to develop in the coming life. If we really get to choose like this, there's no problem with God not being loving, because many people think there can't be a loving God since there's so much evil in the world. But if we actually choose our own challenges, it's not a problem. And especially since between each challenging life, we come back to complete harmony with the people we love in the life between lives. So things happen for a purpose. According to Newton, we have chosen why we have the problems we have today. We want to develop. We want to see these things as challenges, really. So these thoughts, among many positive thoughts which I will touch on later, can have very profound effects on us. Me, it had a very profound effect knowing about near-death experience. When my grandmother died, I was very close to her and thought I was going to really, really go through all the stages of grief. But I didn't. Nothing. No grief. Because I was so convinced, and I still am, that her soul lives on, that she can probably even see me, and that I will meet her again one day when I die. I might even meet her in a dream. I have a strong after-death communication, as it's called, something that 1 of 8 people have with people that they have loved. They get some kind of message from beyond that the person actually lives on. One famous case was about a grandfather who came back and told his granddaughter where he had hidden all his money. Nobody knew. They knew he had money, but they had no idea where it was hidden. She looked there and found it. There are a lot of stories like this, a lot of veridical, it's called, after-death experiences, no, after-death communications, ADC, or near-death experiences, NDE. And I would like to recommend a site, if you're interested in these things, called near-death.com. Very good site. Okay, so keep these good thoughts. There is a purpose to everything we live on. And psychological problems are just on a continuum. They're just a little bit extreme varieties of what is so-called normal. Can be very good, can also be very painful, but we can always get back to the normal state through therapy and good life experiences.